All right, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. Hashem, today we're going to be continuing our study of Pirkei Avot. Hashem, today we're going to be doing Perek Daled, and we're going to be talking about Mishnah Bet. Hashem. First of all, I'd like to thank our host, Mr. and Mrs. Cameron and Nava Borelli. Thank you very much. School of Mitzvot. Hashem, may your house always be open for Shirei Torah, for smachot, for happy occasions, God willing. Thank you very much for hosting us, the School of Mitzvot. Okay, so, and also, if you want to learn for Refuah Shlema somebody, we could mention their names now. Shachar ben Chana, Shmuel Moshe ben Penina, anybody else who needs Refuah Shlema? Moshe ben Rachel, and Hashem, Kol Cholei Yisrael, they should all have Refuah Shlema. Okay, so says the Mishnah, Ben Azai Omer, Heve Ratz LeMitzvah Kala Kebachamura. So Ben Azai, who is actually named Shimon Ben Azai, is referred to over here as Ben Azai. The Mefarshim explained because he did not yet get the title of Smicha at this point. So, but eventually down the road he did. But he was still considered to be a very, very wise Chacham that the Mishnah felt it was necessary to record his incredible words of wisdom. So says the Mishnah. It's pretty cool.
Never leave the door open.
Okay. So says the Mishnah. Ben Azai Omer. Heve ratz lemitzvah kala kevachamura. So a person should run to a light mitzvah, just like a mitzvah chamura, which means a very severe and heavy mitzvah. In other words, in the same way that a person approaches a very heavy mitzvah, something that we all know is really important. Let's say, for example, perhaps we could mention Pesach as a very heavy mitzvah that people take very seriously, the night of the Seder. Or perhaps maybe Brit Milah is a very heavy mitzvah people take very seriously, they celebrate it. In the same way that you take that mitzvah very seriously, you have to take very seriously the quote-unquote light mitzvot as well. Not only should you run to the heavier ones, but you should run to the light ones too. So hevei ratz, you should run le mitzvah kala, to the quote-unquote light mitzvah, keva chamura, just like you do when it comes to a heavy mitzvah. That's number one. Uvoreach min avira, person has to run. Boreach means to like run away, like when somebody is chasing after somebody, one guy is the chaser, the other one is he's fleeing, he's running away from it. He's like running away, trying to save his life. So uboreach min avira, he has to run away from the sin. Shemitzvah goreret mitzvah, because a mitzvah brings about another mitzvah. Va'avira, and a sin goreret avira, brings about another avira. Sheschar mitzvah mitzvah, because the reward for a mitzvah is actually the opportunity to do another mitzvah. Uschar avira, and the reward for a sin is the opportunity to do another sin. So schar avira, avira. The reward for sin is sin itself, that you get to, that now you do another one. So that's a very, very heavy duty concept. So what I would like to do is I would like to take apart each part of what Ben Azai is teaching us and try and demonstrate how these things really happen in real life. So let's take it from the beginning. So says the Mishnah, Ben Azai says, you have to run to the quote-unquote light mitzvah, just like the very severe heavy-duty mitzvah. Okay, so what does that mean? A lot of times people, they think that the things that are small details that are not so significant, you don't really have to pay much attention to them. Sometimes people feel like you can, just kind of skip over certain things. It's not so important. Let's say when you wash your hands for netilat yadayim, if I don't wash my whole hand, okay, what's the big deal? I only washed up until here. Or if I skip maybe the benching, Birkat HaMazon, once in a while, or if I do this, that, people have this kind of attitude like, okay, what's the big deal? It doesn't really make that much of a difference anyway. And what I'd like to show you is that it's really not so, that every little detail in the eyes of Hashem is very precious. In the same way that when there's a relationship between husband and wife, what shows the wife that her husband really cares about her is that he listened to what she said, he listened to the things that she told him she likes, and then he goes out and he buys exactly that kind of flower or exactly that kind of ring or whatever it may be that she was interested in. That shows her that he cares about what she says, that he cares about her feelings, and he wants to make her happy. So the key is the details. So I'll share with you one story that demonstrates this concept, I feel, in a very clear way. This is a story about a soldier named Tamir. Before he got into the Israeli army, Tamir went to the house of a rabbi in his neighborhood, and he had never really spoken to rabbis before. He came from a traditional family. They kept Shabbat, they kept kosher, but he never really had a conversation with rabbis before. And he went to the home of the rabbi, and he explained to the rabbi, I'm here because I'm about to get enlisted in the army. As you know, in Israel, the army service is mandatory. And he said to the rabbi, I know that there are different stories. People are telling me that you have nothing to be worried about. But he said, I know a friend 2 years older than me in high school who was killed in battle. I know another guy who got wounded in training and his damage is irreparable. He's going to be now in a handicap, in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. So I wanted to get a blessing from the rabbi that I want you to promise me that I'm going to come out of my army service complete, whole, no issues, no problems. Give me a blessing. So the rabbi said, listen, I can't promise anything. And I know that you have, reason to be concerned. But what I could do is I could give you a blessing. I could pray for you that everything should work out well. But I'll tell you this, usually if you accept upon yourself something, that means that you do something a little bit extra, another mitzvah that you take upon yourself, that's going to increase the chances of your blessing working for you. So the young man said, listen, I keep Shabbat, I keep kosher. So that's great, that's wonderful. But try and take upon yourself something more. So he said, okay, but it has to be something easy. He said to the rabbi said to him, I've got the perfect thing for you. He says, there's one halakha in Shulchan Aruch about how to tie your shoes. Okay? What you got to do first, you have to put on your right shoe, because we always give the kavod first to the right, which represents mercy. Then we put on the left shoe. Now, you tie the left shoe first. You make the knot on your shoes first on the left, because when a person puts on his tefillin, he ties the tefillin on his left hand, so that gets the kavod first. Then he ties the right shoe. So again, put on your right shoe first, put on your left shoe second, tie the left shoe first, tie the right shoe second, and that's how you got to put on your shoes. He said, that's it? He said, yeah, that's it. That's all you got to do. Okay, fine. He said, I'm doing it. So he started to do it for a few days. And then he joined into the army, and he was, it's not so easy to change your habits. So he was putting on his shoes normal. He forgot. But he said, I made a promise, and tomorrow is going to be different. And he started to put on his shoes. And again, he would make a mistake. And again, the next day he would make a mistake. Tomorrow, he said, is going to be different. He didn't put on his shoes the way that he had promised he's going to do it. And day after day, he was making the same mistake. So then the following morning, he said, okay, I'm doing it. And again, he made the same mistake. It just naturally, he doesn't do it right. So he said, you know what? There's no more games. Right now, even though my shoes are already on, I'm taking them off and I'm putting them back on the right way. Okay, fine. So he decided to do that. And it caused him to be late, because if you're late in the army, it's not good. They could jail you if you're late enough times. So, but he said, no, not going to happen. He put on his shoes the next day wrong, because that's his natural habit. And he realized again that he messed up. He went back, took them off, put them on correctly. And this was happening a bunch of times, because a person naturally puts on his shoes the way he normally does. It's hard to change the habit. So this happened a few times, and it caused him to be late a few times. So his commanding officer was upset, and he told him, listen, you're being late a few times. I know what happened to you, but you keep this up and you're going to face some jail time. And okay, he said, nothing I could do about it. He puts on his shoes the next day. Instead of doing it the right way, again, he messes up, takes off his shoes, puts them on again the right way. Now he comes to his platoon, and the commanding officer says, "Listen, tomorrow morning we're having some kind of a training involving a flight, involving helicopters and things like that. Whoever is not here on time is not going on the helicopter, plain and simple." And he's looking straight at this guy, Tamir. So he says to him, "Whoever is not here on time is not going on, no matter what." Fine. So the next day comes, and once again, he fails to put on his shoes the right way. He puts them on the wrong way. He realizes his mistake. He realizes that he's probably going to miss the train. He takes off his shoes. He puts them on the right way, right first, left second, ties the left, ties the right, and he's on the way running to his group. The whole group is already on the helicopter. He sees them on the helicopter. The commanding officer from the helicopter says, "You're not coming on the helicopter. I warned you about this. And when I get back, you're going to have to tell me and my commanding officer why exactly you were late today." And as the helicopter is ascending, he slowly sees that there's another helicopter that's having some hard kind of time controlling itself. And slowly but surely, both helicopters crash, and everybody on board dies. All the soldiers died. It was a very sad story that took place in the Israeli army, that 2 helicopters full of soldiers crashed and everybody died, except for him. And what saved him? Amazing. You didn't realize the fact that he kept one halacha of tying his shoes properly. And it wasn't easy. And in the morning he woke up and he messed it up. But the bottom line is that he tried to do the best that he could. He fixed himself and he saved himself. So we think, this is what we would call, quote unquote, mitzvah kala. This is a light mitzvah. What is this? It's just tying your shoes according to the halacha. Again, this is generally speaking for men. But the idea is that, it's something that we would think, what's the big deal? You tie your shoe like this, you tie your shoe like that. Who cares about how you tie your shoes? Who cares? You tie this shoelace, that shoelace. Get out of here, right? The answer is no. The details make a difference. When you show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that you care about the small little details, that's what gives Hashem nachat. That's what shows Hashem that you love Him. Hashem, you asked me to put on my shoes a certain way. I put on my shoes a certain way, just out of honor and respect for what you asked me to do.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
So that also shows that he gave it a priority over other things like our regular mundane things that we're doing in our day life. But if you take your time out and like take care, like dedicate it to Hashem, then you do get the reward. We don't see it right away, but that's the point, right? You
always get reward, but the point is that in this case, you see that it saved his life. That's what I'm trying to say. That the little mitzvah, that the quote unquote light mitzvah that we're talking about, which we would view as light. I mean, it's not Pesach, it's not Brit Milah, it's not the big heavy duty things that we always talk about. It's not mikvah, it's not Shabbat, it's tying your shoes, right? But that little quote unquote light mitzvah saved his life. So that's what I'm trying to say. So that's why when the Mishnah tells us, you should run to that light mitzvah, because for all you know, that light mitzvah that you're doing could be what saves your life. We don't think that we give $1 to somebody, that dollar is the difference between, God forbid, a good diagnosis or a God forbid. We don't think about that. That $1 might be the make it or break it. That's my point. Not my point. So the Mishnah is saying we should run to that mitzvah.
So how do they take off the shoes? Like once you put it on?
Taking off. So the left one comes off first.
Oh.
The left one comes off first because you want to give the kavod to the right, that you're not rushing to remove the right one. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, great. Now, let's continue. I'll give you one more example. This one is an amazing example. The Gemara in Masechet Menachot, Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph, tells over a story about someone that he was very strict about the mitzvah of tzitzit. Very strict about tzitzit. He wasn't necessarily the most pious of men, but tzitzit he wore. Okay? So the story goes that he heard about some woman that you had to travel overseas in order to get her services. She was very expensive as well. She was somebody that was an incredibly beautiful woman. Her name got out there as like the most beautiful woman on earth. And then in order to have some time with her, you had to pay 400 gold coins. And so you have to pay first in advance. You send the 400 gold coins, and then you go out there and you get to do what you want to do. That's what the Gemara says in Daf Mem Daled of Masechet Menachot. So this gentleman heard about it, seemed like a nice idea. So he sent her the money, 400 gold coins. And he traveled out there, he traveled overseas, and he reached her location. And it says over there, I mean, it's a very interesting description of how she would do her thing. It says that she had an attendant, and the attendant would go to her and tell her that so-and-so who sent you the money has arrived, and she would say, oh, you can come in. And she had apparently 7 beds, says the Gemara, and all of them had silver around it, and the one on top, the 7th one on top, they all had a ladder to climb up one to the other. She made these 7 beautiful beds, and she had on top, the ladder was made of gold, and the bed had gold all around it. And the Gemara tells us that he was very excited, and she was up there waiting for him, and she was undressed, and he got undressed, and they were all up top on the top bed over there. And all of a sudden, I mean, the one thing that he always kept, that he always was very strict on, was his tzitzit. His tzitzit was on him. So it says all of a sudden the tzitzit, there was a miracle that happened. The tzitzit kind of stood up in front of his face and started whacking him on his eyes, like that. The tzitzit started boom, boom, boom on his eyes. That's what the Gemara tells us. He realizes, whoa, that's not normal. And he immediately climbs down. He goes off the whole big tower over there, and he climbs down and he sits on the floor. She thought something was wrong with herself. She thought that he saw something, that he wasn't, something had turned him off. So she goes down and she sits right next to him on the floor. And she says, listen, I'm swearing by the gods of Rome, I'm not letting you leave here until you tell me what you saw, because this is bad for business. He's going to go now tell the whole world, it's not good. So he said, I promise you, I've never seen anybody as beautiful as you, he said. But I have one mitzvah, and it's called tzitzit. And the tzitzit is a reminder that HaKadosh Baruch Hu rewards those who do good and punishes those who don't do good. And therefore, I'm very sorry, but I have to go. I can't stay here. And she said, I'm not letting you leave until you write down your address, where you live, where you go to shul. I want to know everything about you. He said, okay. He wrote it down and he gave it to her. And he left. He just couldn't bring himself to do that. When tzitzit literally stand up and whack you in the face, that's a sign from Hashem that this is not for you.
Was he married?
Who knows?
But who was this person? Just a story.
It was an individual.
Oh, just an
individual. So something, obviously, the tzitzit, obviously, it's exactly what the purpose of tzitzit are for. It says in the Shema, Uritem oto, you shall remember them. Uzchartem et kol mitzvot Hashem v'astem otam. You shall see the tzitzit, you'll remember all the mitzvot of Hashem, and you'll do them. That's the purpose of tzitzit. So this guy goes back home, and believe it or not, who was his Rebbe? I think his Rebbe was Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara says that I think it was Rabbi Akiva, that was his Rebbe. And he was back in the yeshiva, and this woman followed him. She followed him to his location, and she said, Rabbi, is so-and-so here learning? And he said, yes. And she said, I want you to convert me. I want to become a convert. And he said, are you interested in this guy? And she said, yes, I have to marry this person. And he converted her. And then he told her, go and get your prize. And she got married to him. And the same 7 beds, she sold, I forgot to tell you, she sold everything. She liquidated all her assets. 1/3 she gave to poor people. 1/3 she kept to herself. 1/3 she gave, I think, as taxes. And the only things of her property she kept are the beds and those sheets and all that stuff. So what was going to be done, Beisur, as a as a prohibition, now is done actually in a permissible way. But the point is that quote unquote light mitzvah, I mean, all he was doing was wearing tzitzit. He was the kind of guy that, would find himself in a place like that. And it's not necessarily the most complimentary thing, but the bottom line is he was wearing this tzitzit that was quote unquote a light mitzvah. You don't know how far reaching those quote unquote light mitzvot will be. And therefore it's important to never dismiss the significance of a mitzvah, but rather to run to it as quote unquote light as it may be. Yeah, you have a question?
But I thought you're not allowed to convert someone to be Jewish, and for the sake of to marry.
Ideally.
Yeah.
Ideally, that's correct. But if somebody is already in a situation, it's something else. You're right. You have a very good point. The Mishnah in Masechet Yevamot does say that you should not convert someone for the purpose of marriage. But at the same time, if they're already in a situation, for example, let's say you have a Jewish guy. I mean, this is not the case that we're talking about now, so it's a good question on what we learned. But let's say you have a Jewish guy that's married to he's with a non-Jewish woman, right? And they have children and the whole thing. The only thing that can save this person is if his wife converts. Wife and children convert. So that, in a case like that, that's when we would do that.
But this is a
little different. I agree. It's not the same thing.
So I'm surprised Rabbi Akiva would do.
I think it was Rabbi Akiva. It's one of the Tanaim. So anyway, it's one of the great sages allowed it to happen. Okay, let's continue. Says the Mishnah. So again, we should run to a light mitzvah because we don't know how far-reaching that light mitzvah will be. We don't know what it will save us from. We don't know what it will do for us, because every mitzvah, guys, is, you have to remember, the word mitzvah, the Chassidut teaches, comes from the word tzavta, which means together. When you do a mitzvah, you become closer to Hashem. You come together with Hashem. You open up a channel for blessing from Hashem. So this that he did saved him. Just like the soldier who saved himself by taking that mitzvah of tying his shoes according to halacha. Okay, let's continue. Says the Mishnah, uboreach min ha'avera. Person has to run away from sin. He shouldn't hang around a place where that's something that could happen, but he needs to run away from it. By running away, he shows that he doesn't want it. He shows that he's not interested, and he has a better chance of saving himself from it. Very interesting story with Rabbi Shalom Sharabi, the Rosh Hashiva of Bet El, who was one of the greatest Kabbalists who ever lived. Rabbi Shalom Sharabi, tremendous tzaddik. The Rashash, they call him. The story goes that when he was younger, he would sell all kinds of things. He was a rochel, he was a peddler. He would go and he would sell different things, perfumes and all kinds of different items that he would go around from place to place, and he would peddle. He was a Yemenite. He was living in a city called Sana'a in Yemen, and he was a very handsome man. So what happened was that there was one minister who was an Arab minister, and his wife was at home, and she saw him and she desired him. So she, made as if she wants to buy something from him, and she told him to come inside. He wanted to sell something to her. So she immediately shut the door and locked it, and he didn't have a way out. And she immediately demanded that he should, be with her or else, because she's a powerful woman. And he was a big tzaddik, even when he was younger. So he realized there's no way out. He has a big problem. So he said, listen, no problem. I have to use the restroom first. So can you please show me where I can go to the bathroom? And she showed him where the bathroom was. There was a small, tiny window in the bathroom, and they were 3 flights up. So he pushed open the window, and he kind of scrunched himself through the window, and he fell out 3 floors down, running away from an Averah. And he came out without any injury, totally untouched, totally unharmed, and he ran away. But the idea is that when somebody runs away from an Averah, Hashem helps him. Hashem blesses him that he should be okay. And you can't go wrong by running away from an Avirah. A lot of times there are situations people are, tempted to go to this place, go to that place, etc. But meanwhile, the attitude needs to be the opposite. Run away from it, you'll never lose by running away from it. A lot of times we get together with people, friends, that they like to talk Lashon Hara, that they like to badmouth people, etc. You have to think, is that the right place to be? Or should I run from it? Because sometimes it's, you can tell that it's going to go in a wrong direction. We have to learn to run away from that. Okay. Clear? 100%? Okay, excellent. Let's go. Now, so, shemitzvah goreret mitzvah. We learned in the Mishnah that one mitzvah brings about another mitzvah. The concept here is very important to understand. The concept is that when you do a mitzvah, you draw down from Shamayim a very powerful energy to yourself that now enables you to do even more than what you were able to do before. Mitzvah goreret mitzvah means that now you are afforded more opportunities to do even greater things than you did in the past. And I'll give you one example of this. The concept is called megalgelim zechut al yedei zakai, which means Hashem gives opportunities to do mitzvot to the people that are already on the path of doing mitzvot. You have an opportunity to do something great because you've already done wonderful things. You've already accomplished wonderful things, so Hashem throws more at you, which is a very important thing. I'll give you an example. So there was a man named Elkanah. This is from the Tanakh. Elkanah was a man that was very devoted to the mitzvah of the 3 festivals. As you know, there are 3 festivals, Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot. And Elkanah went out of his way to encourage all the Jewish people to go up to Yerushalayim on the 3 festivals, which is what it says to do in the Torah. It says, Shalosh pamim bashana, yira'eh kol zechurcha et pnei Hashem. 3 times a year, all of the males must be seen by Hashem, where? In the Bet HaMikdash. They have a mitzvah to leave their homes and to go to Bet HaMikdash. So Elkanah wanted to make people do that. He wanted to encourage them to do that. So he would travel with his family and with another 60 families, and they would go from place to place. Every year they would go up to Jerusalem from a different route. They would go one holiday from this route. Let's say, that they say, going from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem through Haifa. It doesn't make sense. Haifa's up north. Tel Aviv to Jerusalem is not the same thing. So he would go that way. He would go through Haifa to show everybody that, look, we're traveling together. We're going up to Yerushalayim, and you guys should join us. And then he would go from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem through Beersheba, down south. And he would show everybody that he's going to Yerushalayim for the festivals. He went out of his way, literally, to show everybody that I'm going to do this mitzvah. So that's called being mezakeh harabim, to give zechut, to try and afford people the opportunity to do the mitzvah. A lot of times people don't know about it. So you go and you teach them, you show them, and you're making it a big deal so that they should learn to do this, right? So that is a huge, huge nachat to Hashem. When Hashem sees somebody is trying to encourage others to do mitzvot, that's a huge deal. And Hashem says, Elkanah, the Midrash tells us, Hashem tells Elkanah, you went out of your way to teach people about the mitzvah of going up to Yerushalayim. You did above and beyond to give zechut to the people that I should view the Jewish nation favorably. So I promise you, I'm going to do something for you that's going to be an even bigger zechut for the Jewish people. Elkanah had a wife named Chana, right? Chana did not have a child. He had 2 wives. He had Chana and Penina. Chana did not have any child for many years. And it was a big problem. And Chana had to pray and pray and pray and nothing doing. But eventually she got her request fulfilled. And who did she have as a son? Shmuel. So Shmuel judged the entire Jewish nation for years, for decades. And he taught people Torah and he taught people what to do. Why did Elkanah have this zechut to have a son like Shmuel, that it says about Shmuel that he's like Moshe and Aaron combined. You imagine what it means to be Shmuel, right? So it says that Shmuel was like one of the greatest leaders who ever lived, and he taught everyone Torah, and he kept people in line, and he went around the whole country judging everybody and teaching everybody. So what gave them the zechut to have a son like Shmuel? Because Elkanah, his father, went around and was Moser Nefesh. He gave of himself, and he did above and beyond to teach people the mitzvah of the 3 festivals. So that's called mitzvah goreret mitzvah. You do a mitzvah. You are Moser Nefesh for that mitzvah. You give of yourself. You try hard to make sure that that mitzvah is observed. So not only is it going to be something that you will have the opportunity to do other mitzvot like that, but even your children get the opportunity to do more mitzvot like that and get the opportunity to teach others. It's a big, big deal. And I tell you, there are just so many things over here that I want to share with you about this concept. I don't even know where to begin. I'll give you another example. So of course, it means that you have the opportunity to do more mitzvot. Hashem gives you the opportunity. Very important, 100%. But I want to focus on the idea that the mitzvot that you do will have an effect on your children too. Very important. There's a story about Rabbi Wallace. Have you guys ever heard about Rabbi Wallace from Arachim? He's the person that started this amazing organization called Arachim, where they teach people that don't know much about Torah. They teach them and they make seminars for them. He was an American. There's a book about him called Incredible. And it's really incredible. It's an amazing book about this man. He tells over the story about himself. He is an American person that he grew up in the Bronx. He was involved in actually some Jewish gangs and stuff like that. Very interesting. And eventually he made his way to Israel, but he was not an observant person at all. Didn't keep anything. And because he didn't grow up that way. So he's in Israel. He's married at this point, and his wife asks him to pick up dinner on the way home. And he's at some place, I forgot the name of it. It's a famous place for people that don't, keep kosher. And he's online and he's waiting to order pork for his family. He's buying for dinner a nice roast of pork. That's what he's trying to do. So he's online. His wife asked him to pick this up, and he is thinking about a story that he had heard about his grandfather. His grandfather was a Holocaust survivor. The story was actually, you'll see exactly what I mean. The story about his grandfather that he heard from his parents was that his grandfather survived Auschwitz all the way throughout almost the entire war, something that is unheard of. And the Russians were on the way to liberate the camps. And the Nazis, Yimach Shemam, had gotten word of this. They were aware that the liberation was on the way, the Russians were on the way, the Americans were on the way. So the Nazis realized that their time was up. So what they did was they wanted to get in their last licks. They wanted to get in a few, whatever they could do. So the Nazi says to this Jew, who's Rabbi Wallace's grandfather, he says to him, you see this? This is a piece of pork. You're going to be out of here by tomorrow. You don't have anything to worry about. I'll let you live. No problem. Just eat this piece of pork. Now, this man had survived years in this concentration camp. And he had a gun to his head. He said, the guy told him, either you eat this or I'm going to shoot you. So the grandfather stands up and he tells the Nazi, he says, listen, I've been here for years. I've endured things that nobody should ever endure. And this entire time, I didn't eat one thing that's not kosher. It's not about to change now. And he spits in the Nazi's face. And the Nazi takes out the gun and shoots him. And he dies on the spot. On the last day of the war. Last day of the war, that's when he died. So he survived until then. Rabbi Wallace is online about to willingly go and buy pig with no gun to his head.
A rabbi?
Yeah, he wasn't a rabbi yet. He was not observant yet. But he was there, and all of a sudden it clicked in his head. He said, I understand. My grandfather, I was told, gave up his life not to eat this thing. And here I am going and buying it willingly? Does that make any sense? He calls up his wife. He says, Ali, I'm not doing it. I can't buy this. And he realizes that he has to start to change things. But my point is that the mitzvah that grandfather did. Now, again, I'm not necessarily telling you that al pi halacha he was required to give up his life. I'm not saying that anything like that. It could be that he was. It could be that he wasn't. Depends on circumstances. Was it in front of people? Was it in private? It's a whole story. But the point I'm trying to bring you is that when a person is willing to be moser nefesh, which means he's willing to give up his life for a mitzvah, Hashem looks at that as such a precious thing, the most precious thing, that Hashem says his children will also have the opportunity to keep that mitzvah, to be able to do good, and to keep and to come back to mitzvot. Mesirut nefesh is the most powerful thing. When you're willing to be devoted and dedicated and give of yourself for a mitzvah, it never goes empty-handed. You'll always be rewarded for that. I'll tell you one more incredible story about this. This is really amazing. Rabbi Pesach Krohn brings down an amazing story about a man. His name was Rabbi Yisrael Mitzman. And he tells over an incredible story about his parents. He says his father was Avrum and his mother was Yidis Mitzman. They lived in Russia. And in Russia, they couldn't keep, Ukraine actually, which was part of Russia at the time. They could not keep any mitzvot publicly. They weren't allowed to pray publicly. They weren't allowed to do anything Jewish publicly whatsoever. And what happened was they had girls, Baruch Hashem, they had a bunch of girls, children, but they didn't have any boys. And the father always wanted to make a brit milah. The father always wore a kippah at home. Outside he wore something else, but inside he wore a kippah. And he was always very observant. And the mother lit Shabbat candles. They kept Shabbat at home. They were very observant. They were very warm Jews. But publicly, you couldn't do anything, or else they'd find out and they would punish you. KGB. So what happened was one day, finally, they had their son Yisrael. And already at the hospital, the father, Avrum, was going around telling everybody, I'm so happy, I had a boy. I could do a Brit Milah now. And he was announcing to the whole world, I want to do Brit Milah, Brit Milah. He was so excited about the Brit Milah of his son that finally he could do this mitzvah. He loved mitzvah. Anyway, people got word of what he was saying. And unfortunately, the way it worked with the KGB was they encouraged family to turn against their own family. Because what they would do, they wanted family members to be afraid that they would be the first ones to be attacked if eventually they found out that their relative was doing something wrong and they knew about it. So family was in so much fear if there was somebody about to break the law that they would be the first ones to turn in their own family. So they got word that their cousin or whoever it was, Avrum, is planning on doing a Brit Milah for their son. And they went and they informed the KGB. The KGB told Avrum, the law is you're not allowed to do a Brit Milah for your son. If you do so, you will be fined and you'll be jailed. And he told them back openly. He said, very sorry, but I have a mitzvah from Hashem, and whatever happens, happens. Like that. And so it was. He hired a mohel to come from a different city, 60 miles away. They secretly did the Brit Milah. The cousins informed again the KGB. They took him to jail for 4 months. 4 months in jail for doing a Brit Milah for his son. Okay? No regrets. Everything is good. Everything is fine. Whatever Hashem wants. But bottom line, I did a Brit Milah for my son. Okay? Fast forward a few more years, they had a couple more girls. And once again, they had another boy. And this time he was so ecstatic. Again, Brit Milah. I'm so happy. Brit Milah, I'm going to do a Brit. Fine. And surely enough, he didn't inform people this time because he didn't want the whole world to know. But the cousins found out about it again. And they told the KGB he had a boy. He's going to do a Brit Milah. They came to him and they said to him, listen, Avrum, we know you. Apparently, he had served in the Red Army as well. And he fought against the Nazis. So they said to him, listen, you've been loyal to the motherland for so long. You fought against the Nazis. You've fought side by side. But why are you changing now? What happened? He said to them, listen, I'm very sorry. I have a mitzvah from Hashem that comes first. I'm going to do a Brit Milah. They said, we're very sorry. But if you do a Brit Milah, not only is it jail, but this time it's Siberia. You're going to go to Siberia as a repeat offender. He said, I'm doing it. Whatever happens, happens. And he did the Brit Milah. The cousins informed the KGB time and place. They caught him and they took him to the jail. And they said, say goodbye to your wife and kids. You're going to Siberia for an undefined, unquantified amount of years. It could be the rest of his life for all they know. Okay? They take him to the jail. At this point, the family had 9 kids. And of course, some babies. The wife takes her 9 kids to the KGB headquarters. And she says, I want to see your commanding officer. And they take her to the head of the jail at that time. And she says to the commanding officer, she says, listen, I have 9 kids. If I don't have my husband, I can't raise them. So guess who's going to raise them? You. She takes all her 9 kids, some of them infants, and she drops them off at the KGB headquarters. And she says, I'm leaving. And she leaves. She goes downstairs. She says, you're raising my kids. I can't raise them without my husband. And kids, they start playing around. They start throwing papers around. They start opening windows, closing things, touching things, drawing on walls and all kinds of things. She left them all there. So the commanding officer was terrified of what's going to happen to his headquarters over there. So he takes Avrum out of his cell and he brings down the 9 kids. And surely enough, she was waiting. She figured something like this would happen. And he said, take your husband and your kids and go. And make sure you never come back here again. Like that. And she took them. The amazing thing was that both the father and the wife were mosrim nefesh. They gave of themselves. They were willing to literally go to jail or who knows what for the mitzvah of Brit Milah. Now, the story doesn't end there. They eventually moved to Israel. The whole family, 9 kids, they moved to Israel. Now, they had a son. The first son, his name was Yisrael. So this boy, Yisrael, went to yeshiva. They were such proud Jews. They were so proud of how they gave up of themselves, everything they had to do Brit Milah. And Yisrael went to yeshiva and he learned and he became a big Talmid Chacham. He became a scribe of mezuzot and tefillin. And he was a big tzaddik. And he got married. And eventually down the road, this Yisrael, his father-in-law, became very ill. Now the father-in-law lived in New York. So Yisrael, who was learning very well, and he was teaching, he was doing amazing things in Israel, he went to Rav Aaron Leib Steinman, the Gedol Ador, before Rav Chaim Kanievsky passed away. He went to Rav Leib Steinman and he asked him, should I go? My father-in-law wants my wife to be near him to help him out in New York. But I'm doing very well here in Israel. Maybe I should send her and I could stay here. And the rabbi said, no, you have to go. Why do you have to go? Because your father-in-law is going to be concerned that your wife is not happy, and that's going to stall his recuperation. You have to be there. So the Rabbi Mitzman went with his wife to New York, and he was there, and he helped his wife take care of her father. And he was teaching in Or Sameach, and eventually he was asked to say a shiur in Pelham Parkway over here by the Bronx. You drive up the, what's it called, 95. So you pass Pelham Parkway. So apparently they had a yeshiva over here a few years back with 80 students. 15 of them were Russian immigrants that really didn't know much. And it was right up his alley because he was from Ukraine. So they asked him to take care of these boys. So he was teaching them, taking care of these boys. And he slowly realized that these kids, none of them have a Brit Milah. None of them have Brit Milah. They came from Russia. They came from the Soviet Union. They don't have Brit Milah. So he figured you can't start telling them, you guys need to do Brit Milah. So what he decided to do was he told them, listen, if you guys study very well on your tests, so then I'll put you on a list of people that might, maybe, if you're lucky, win the raffle to get a Brit Milah. Like that. That's what he said. Okay? And kids did very well. This one kid, Dimitri, he really wanted it, and he got on the list of people that might get a Brit Milah. Okay? Fine.
Did they know what
Surely
it
enough.
was?
What?
Did they know what a Brit Milah was?
He explained it to them. Yes, they were still willing. That's, you see, a Jewish neshama wants to do good things. They were still willing to do it. Okay, Dimitri won, and he is now on his way to getting a Brit Milah. The mother is freaking out. The mother calls up this Rabbi Mitzman, and she says to him, "Are you out of your mind? My son is perfectly Jewish. He doesn't need to do anything to his body. What are you doing involving kids in this? You should be ashamed of yourself." She gave it to him so bad. He said, "Listen, I'm just trying to help him do a mitzvah. He wants to do it. It's not that I forced it on him. He willingly decided he wants to do this." So she said, "I see I'm not getting anywhere. I'm sending my father to come talk to you." So she sends her father, Boris. And Boris comes and he gives this rabbi a piece of his mind. He says, "It's not right what you're doing. What are you even offering this to the kids for? What do you think this is? It's a surgery. It's a whole procedure. Do you have any right to tell them about this? What's the matter with you?" And he said, "Listen, dear grandfather, you're a very special man. I see how much you love Torah, how much you love mitzvot." He's giving it to him, nicely. And he tells him, it's something that we need to do. He has to get a brit. And something touched the grandfather, and the grandfather revealed that he himself doesn't have a Brit Milah. And he said, "I know that you're right. I see how passionate you are about what you're saying. But, his mom is going to kill me. But I want to do a Brit Milah too." Mm-hmm. So he says that the grandson and now the grandfather, and the mom is going nuts. So she sends her husband, Victor, to come and talk to the rabbi. Mm-hmm. And Victor is saying, "I don't know what they said. I don't know what's going on, but you're out of your mind. I'm pulling my kid out. This is wrong. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't talk to people about this stuff. My son is perfectly Jewish," etc., etc., etc. And eventually the rabbi started talking to him, and he said, "Listen, tell me about your history. Tell me about your past." And they open up, and eventually they realized they were also in the Soviet Union, and he too doesn't have a Brit Milah. So the rabbi explains, "Listen, I see a golden opportunity. I think that now that we're all here, your father-in-law wants to do a Brit Milah, your son wants to do a Brit Milah. I think it's time for you to do one too." Mm-hmm. And then one day he calls a mohel, and they all agree to do it. And eventually he asks who wants to go first. This little kid, Dimitri, says, "It's me. I want to go first. I started it." And he gets the first Brit Milah, and his father got a Brit Milah, and his grandfather got a Brit Milah, all in that one day, in the zchut of this person, of this Rabbi Mitzman. Now, what compelled him to do this, to do that? He saw the Mesirut Nefesh. He saw how much his mom was willing to give up her own children. She put her own children at risk, so to say, for this mitzvah. His father, literally was about to get sent to Siberia for this mitzvah. And he wasn't hiding it, and he wasn't ashamed of it. He said, "This is what we're doing. Hashem said, do the mitzvah. We're doing it." That's called mitzvah goreret mitzvah. The parents did something so positive, so amazing. So the kids are going to do the same thing. That mitzvah that they did, their kids are going to want to do it, be involved in it as well. They see it from the parents, it sticks, makes them want to do it. Very important. That's something that we have to learn. We can't just say, "Oh, my kids will be different." No. what you do will have a very powerful effect on your children. Person doesn't know, I want to be a little bit more tsnu'ah and cover up a little bit more. You don't know how powerful that's going to be for your children. Person wants to be better at Shabbat. They accept upon themselves to learn a little bit more, to do something. They have no clue how much power that will affect their children, their grandchildren. Hashem views these little details as the most precious thing on earth that will stand for the zechut of your children. So important for us to understand that. And the Mishnah ends off saying, Uschar avira avira, that the reward for a sin is another sin. The problem is like this. Like I said before, when you do a mitzvah, that energy that you draw down from Hashem encompasses you, it surrounds you. I saw recently, not too long ago, somebody did a what's it called? Like a kind of study about auras that glow around a person. And they had actually Rav Mordechai Eliyahu Zatzal, the chief rabbi of Israel, former chief rabbi of Israel, putting on tefillin. And they had him, he was a big Kabbalist, so before he would put on tefillin, they watched him, how he would think about certain names of Hashem before he did it, and you would see that all of a sudden around him it would start to become very white. You could watch this on YouTube, actually. It's amazing. Monitor, right? It's some kind of a monitor that you could see what's going on. And when he put on tefillin, it started to glow even more and even more. There's a certain energy of Kedusha that enwraps someone when he does a mitzvah. The sad part is the same holds true when somebody does an avera. When somebody does something wrong, all of a sudden he's surrounded with what's called klipa. Klipa means a negative energy that is there to suck out anything good that you did because you brought it upon yourself. So it's hard to break free of it when the person is already in it. So that's why it says in the Mishnah, Sachar Avera, the reward for the Avera is more Avera, because it's hard to break loose from that encapsulating energy that's there to trip you, to get you to go down and to be worse and worse. So it's very hard to break free of that. That's why from the get-go, we want to stay far away from that. We want to stay very far away from that so that we are on an incline, going up, always trying to do better. So it's important to realize that when somebody starts to stumble, it can only get worse and worse and worse unless he catches himself right away and does tshuva on the spot and make sure not to let it get there. You know, sometimes people really don't realize it, but before they know it, I once heard a guy speaking, and this was in Israel. And Baruch Hashem, he was chozer b'tshuva, but he said, you know, I didn't realize what was going on. But one day I was already so far off that I was driving in the car with my non-Jewish girlfriend, and all of a sudden it hit me, hey, isn't today Yom Kippur? You know, like, you know, and he realized, yeah, that's how far he went. He didn't process, but it was one thing that led to the next thing, that led to the next thing, and before he knows it, he's completely gone. And it's very hard to come out of that because you're just completely surrounded. That's what the Mishnah is telling us. Schar avera avera, avera goreret avera. One sin pulls another, which leads to another, and etc. So the person has to know, and remember, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does things that are wrong. Everybody messes up. But the key is, what do you do after? Do you stop and say, well, I just did that, so I'm done with? Or do you pick yourself up and say, no, I can't let that continue happening. I spoke Lashon Hara, I messed up. But I can make sure that next time I don't speak Lashon Hara. I said something I shouldn't have said to my spouse, I messed up. But I can make sure that next time I won't talk like that to him. I won't lose my temper with my kids. I'll make sure that I'm patient with them, etc., etc., etc. You can change it if you just catch it on time. But if you let it get out of control, then already it's very hard to change it. So it's important to be aware that avera goreret avera, and it's of utmost importance to stop it right away and nip it in the bud. All right, everybody, thank you very much for joining us. If we have any questions, we can take them now. If not, we could stop over here.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Any questions, comments? We're good? Okay, excellent. Beautiful. Thank you for joining us on Zoom, too. Let's go to Mitzvah.